You know that feeling, right? You have that one big, important thing you have to do. And suddenly you find yourself alphabetizing your spice rack. We've all been there. But what if I told you that procrastination isn't a character flaw? It's not about being lazy, it's just a brain thing. So let's get into the science of how to finally stop putting things off and start getting them done. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at what's actually happening in your head when you procrastinate. Then, we'll bust a huge myth about motivation that's probably holding you back. After that, we'll get into the good stuff, a whole toolkit of strategies to get started, stay consistent, and even plan for those days when things just don't go right. Okay, first things first. Procrastination isn't about laziness. It's about a very real biological tug of war that happens inside your brain every single time you're faced with something you'd rather not do. I mean, it's the million-dollar question, isn't it? You know what you need to do, you know what'll be good for you, but it feels like there's this invisible wall between you and the task. Turns out, that wall isn't imaginary at all. It's actually built by your brain's own wiring. Let's meet the two sides pulling the rope. So in one corner, you've got your limbic system. Think of this as the toddler in your brain. It just wants to feel good, right now. It craves comfort and instant rewards. And in the other corner, you have the prefrontal cortex, the adult in the room. It's trying to make smart, long-term plans. Procrastination is just what happens when the toddler wins that fight, choosing the instant gratification of scrolling social media over the long-term payoff of, say, finishing that work project. It's a real thing called present bias. All right, get ready for the big twist, because this next part changes everything. If you're someone who waits to feel motivated before you start something, well, you could be waiting a very, very long time. It turns out we've been thinking about motivation completely backward. We all do this, right? We wait for that magical bolt of inspiration to strike before we sit down to work. We think motivation is what you need before you can take action. But the science shows that we've got the whole equation upside down. And this idea right here just flips the whole script. Action comes first. That little bit of progress, that tiny first step, that's what actually creates the feeling of motivation. You don't wait for the feeling, you have to act your way into the feeling. You can even think about it like physics, which is pretty cool. You know, an object at rest stays at rest, and an object in motion stays in motion. It's the same with our work. The hardest part is always getting started. That's where all the friction is. Once you get moving, even just a little, it's so much easier to keep going. Okay, so if starting is the biggest hurdle, the question becomes, how do we make that hurdle as small as possible? Let's get into the practical stuff. How to make taking that first step so incredibly easy, your brain doesn't even have a chance to say no. This right here is one of the most powerful tricks you can use. The 2-minute rule is genius because it completely sidesteps that internal debate. A huge goal like clean the kitchen becomes put one dish in the dishwasher. Write my essay becomes open the document and write one sentence. The secret isn't about finishing the task in 2 minutes. It's about making the act of starting so simple that you can't possibly say no. And there are other ways to stack the deck in your favor. You could build a pre-game ritual, just a little routine that signals to your brain it's time to work. You can also design your environment to make starting easier, like putting your running shoes right by the door. And one of the most effective strategies is something called an implementation intention, which is a fancy term for a super simple plan. Okay, this is an absolute game changer. An if-then plan connects a new habit you want to start with something you already do every day, so you're not trying to figure out when you'll study. The decision is already made. If I pour my coffee, then I will study for 5 minutes. It's wild, but studies show this simple trick can make you 2 to 3 times more likely to actually follow through. So getting started once is great, but what about day 2 and day 20? To make progress over the long haul, we need to stop chasing those big, flashy moments of motivation and start building reliable systems that work even when we don't feel like it. And that brings us to this powerful idea of atomic habits. It's all about focusing on getting just 1% better every single day. Forget about massive transformations. The real magic is in the small, consistent actions that you take daily. These tiny changes add up and compound over time into truly incredible results. And if you don't believe me, just look at the math. This chart shows it all. Improving by just 1% each day doesn't feel like much at all. But if you stick with it for a year, that tiny daily effort compounds until you are nearly 38 times better than when you started. That is the incredible power of consistency. So how do we keep that momentum going?
Well, first, build a baseline. That's the absolute minimum you'll do even on your worst day. Second, use the Goldilocks rule. Work on things that are just on the edge of your abilities. Not too easy, not too hard. And finally, track your progress. Just seeing a streak or checking a box gives your brain a little hit of satisfaction that makes you want to do it again.
All right, let's be real for a second. Life is messy. You're gonna have off days, you're gonna fall off track. The people who succeed aren't the ones who never fail, they're the ones who have a plan for when they inevitably do. Sometimes just being optimistic can actually backfire. If you only imagine everything going perfectly, the very first obstacle can completely derail you. A much smarter approach is to be a realistic optimist. Hope for the best, but have a concrete plan for the challenges you know are coming. And here's a fantastic tool for that. It's called the WOOP method, and it stands for Wish, Outcome, Obstacle, Plan. It's brilliant because it combines the fun of dreaming about your goal with the practical, realistic step of figuring out what's going to get in your way and making a plan to deal with it ahead of time. Let's see how this works. Your wish and outcome get you excited. But the obstacle step, that's where the real magic is. You get honest about the real challenge. Here, it's being too tired after work. And then you create an if-then plan specifically for that obstacle. So when that moment arrives, you don't have to think. You've already made the smart decision for your future tired self. So we've gone from brain chemistry all the way to day-to-day strategies. But none of this matters if you don't actually use it. Knowledge is just potential power. Action is real power. So let's bring this all home and put it into practice, right now. That's it. That's the whole thing. Don't worry about finishing the entire project. Forget about the deadline. What is one tiny, 2-minute action you can take on something important to you right now? Because as we have learned, motivation isn't something you just find one day. It's something you create 2 minutes at a time. So what are you going to do with your next 2?